And welcome back, and a good day to all. This is part 2 of our center console or floor console install into our 2016 2500. In the previous clip, we removed the center jump seat, and we're just now in the process of kind of prepping our center console to be its replacement. In the previous clip, we talked about removing the 2 wiring harnesses that connected up here on the front. We've done that. We've removed the Christmas tree clips, cut back the tape on the harness so we could take the remainder of our 2 connections from there, run them out the side, so all 3 of our connection points, now much like our center jump seat, are now running out of the side of the console. Ready to make our connections with. We did borrow a part from our old lower piece of trim. If you remember, this piece of trim had a 12 volt keyed port and had this little nifty kind of pre-converter where it took the factory plug that would normally go to one of these ports and converted it over to USB for you. Unfortunately, this requires a different size connector, so we couldn't use it inside the console here. But we did end up taking this one out of our old piece of trim, because this one here, which came out of the center console, it has a broken plastic tab. Looks like just from use, and it was kind of loose inside of our enclosure here. So the only issue is, you can see that the outside covers where we got the printing is keyed a little different, so it's kind of sideways in here. But again, it's a 12 volt power port. It really doesn't matter, you know, which way the labeling on the outside sits. It'll work just fine. So no issue there. We got that taken care of. We just have to plug that one back in, and then what we'll do is we'll take some loom tape, and we'll just tape all this up in loom tape, much like it was on our center seat when we got it out. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of this, get this harness wrapped up here. Before we forget, let's go ahead and plug our 12 volt power port back in. There we go. So now we have a keyed source of 12 volt inside that cubby hole. And what I'll do is, like I said, I think I'll just take some loom tape, get this wrapped up, and get it situated where it'll just kind of pour it out here to the side, and then we'll go on to the next piece. And I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So just out of curiosity, in case you were curious, we got it wrapped up in loom tape, and we went ahead and put the outer loom piece back on just for some added protection. And comparing the pins on this new console versus the plugs on the old center seat, this one's identical because it's USB. This one's identical, colors, number of pins, and everything. That's the center connection there. And this bigger connector is identical as far as the ground and the purple wire here. It only has 2 more wires that exist inside this connector that this connector over here, you can see, doesn't have. And if we look at our color codes and we see this pink with yellow tracer in this ground, so the one extra pair of wires that this one connector has that our old one does not, goes up and feeds power into our center port there inside the cup holder, which makes sense. That center jump seat only has the 1 USB port up top. This one's got 2 USB ports, so that's why we've got the extra set of wires. So we'll just have to look underneath the driver's seat and see if it accommodates that extra set. If it doesn't, you know, no harm, no foul. It's not the end of the day. We could, if we need USB power, we could either just use the one that's on the top, located inside the cushion here, or we can, like I said, we can just plug this one back in and leave it hanging inside the cubby hole above the glove compartment, and that'll also give us a source of USB power if we need it. But like I said, we'll check, but chances are the factory harness in our truck has accommodations for that. I'd be kind of surprised if it didn't. Usually it'll do, because it's what you call mass producing parts. Normally a factory harness will have accommodations for options that you may not have in your truck, but they use that same harness for multiple trim levels, if that makes sense. But again, we'll check it out. Okay, other than that, let's see. The next piece that we need to do is let's work on our center bezels, and we need to get this center trim piece on our old bezel onto our new bezel. So I'm going to get set up for that, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see it's just a pile of Phillips screws. And kind of what we're left with when we take all that out is just a kind of a skeleton of a piece of trim. This top piece, you just take all the Phillips screws out around this border, to include the two at their top. And this whole piece comes out as one unit. And then the bottom switch bank is two Phillips screws and a couple of catches you see here. Release the catches and take out the Phillips screws, and you get your switch bank module out. So what we have to do is we're going to do the same thing to that one, and then put those pieces in here. So I'm going to go ahead and work on that, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So I thought it may be easier to kind of show you this existing one we're getting ready to disassemble before we disassemble it. And you can see this border of Phillips screws that goes all the way around. And when you take all those out, this whole center piece drops out along with this center module. And then you got 4 Phillips screws here, and these plastic tangs. You just push back on the tangs, take the screws out, and then those pieces will drop out. Now remember, we also need to take out the 115 volt outlet that our inverter goes into. It looks like there's 4 more Phillips screws on this side. And then we obviously need our 2-wheel to 4-wheel drive selection module, which is, again, looks to be 4 more Phillips, and that module will come out in one piece. Now they gave us vents, which look like it's the exact same vents as what we have in here, so we may utilize our old vents, or we may just take the vents they gave us. I don't know. I'm thinking I may unclip these old vents and just move these vents over to the new piece of trim, and that way it kind of keeps all of this together in one piece, you know, obviously other than us changing the outside trim piece. So that's it in a nutshell. We're going to take all these screws out, all these pieces out, and start to get them transposed into our new trim, or new bezel, I should say. So I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got our old frame, our old bezel stripped down, as you can see. And it's actually kind of cool that these are as universal as they are. I mean, it makes sense from a production standpoint, because it means they could use this bezel literally with any trim level and any option level just by changing, you know, the front face there as far as what AC controls to use, or the, you know, what switch bank to include on the bottom piece there. I went ahead and took the vents out as well. I figured, why not? We might as well just use all of our original pieces out of this bezel. And the only thing to note there is that on each corner of the vent, you can see it there. That's where it mounts in, and it just clips in via tabs here on the side. I'll show you that here in a moment. But it is a T15 Torx. Let me verify that. Yes. T15 Torx. So there's 2 T15 Torx that hold everything in, just the vents and the bezel. Everything else is a Phillips. So let's set our old bezel to the side, because again, that type of bezel goes with that type of center seat. Let's get our new bezel in here, and then we'll start populating it with our components we took out of the first one. But to show you these vents, you see they lock in to these tabs here on the side. And what we can do is that one. Nope, that is not that one. See, we can get our side clips in, push it forward, get our other clips to seat. See, we got one more clip here on the side. There we go, we got it. So all of our clips are seated, and now we can put our one Torx fastener here and then do the same thing with the other vent on this side. So I'm going to go on, get the vents in, and I'll bring you back for the next piece. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got both our vents in and secured. Now it's time for our centerpiece, and this is our radio bezel as well as our circulation fan, temperature, and of course duct control, or I guess you can call it that. Basically the selector from either defrost or floor or in your face, and so on and so forth, as far as your airflow. Now you'll see a little tab here at the top of this, and let's see if I can get you in here and hold you steady enough to show you this. If we take this piece, come in from the other side, kind of take this at an angle and get the top in here first. There we go. You can see how that lip kind of overlaps and comes in. And then once that's in there, everything else lines up, and now we can put our Phillips screws in. So you see how that kind of overlaps, and you feed the top in first, then hinge it down, and then put the rest of the screws in. So let me get all the Phillips screws put back in this, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got our radio bezel, and then environmental controls back into our bezel. And what we can do next is grab our lower switch bank, which is not near as feature rich, at least yet anyway. And we can get this one just kind of pressed in place. You can see the little side tabs will lock it, and now we can just put our Phillips screws in. I'll bring you along for the ride on this one because it's only 4. Not that watching a video of putting Phillips screws into a piece of trim isn't riveting. Okay. Now if we turn our bezel forward, you can see vents are in, centerpiece is in, lower switch bank is in. Now what we've got left into our bezel is going to be our 115 volt outlet, which is this piece right here, one on this side. Again, just held in place by 4 Phillips screws. So even if you order one of these kits, unless you are specifically looking to get some different switches or different HVAC controls or option buttons down there at the bottom, if you just order a kit and you're not wanting to change any of your other controls out like we're not doing here, If all it does is come with just a skeleton of a bezel, like it does, well, like the way it looks when you take all the pieces out of it, then at least know that you can just take your existing items out of your existing bezel and just cross everything over. Come on, thread in. That one's going to be a pain. I mean, you get the idea. Let me pause you and bring it back. One moment. And welcome back. And with that, there you go. So there's our new bezel with our old options and old trim pieces in it. But ready to go and get mated up, kind of just like that, a little bit like that, and go for a reinstall. Now there's two other items we still need to account for as far as converting everything over to our console, and that is making up a spot for our old switches for our heated seats. We need to account for the ones in the front and the ones in the back. I need to go get the switches out of the truck. So let me go do that. Like I said, I think for the front seats, we're probably going to mount the aftermarket switches here in kind of these corner pockets. Again, that'll keep them away from being hit or kicked or being hit by the seat or potentially having something spilled on them if they're up here in this area. So let me go get those switches and I'll be right back. One moment. And welcome back. So I'm just showing you the getting ready to put the switch in the passenger side. Yeah, not ideal. Not that I want to drill holes into a used console, if you want to call it that. But again, for now, it's the heated seats we have. It's the ones we're going to continue to use until we get something different. And even if we do switch over eventually to a factory set of heated seats, then we'll just disconnect the switches and just leave them in there, just so the holes will be plugged. But one other thing I'm doing on these, it takes a 3/4 inch hole to seat these, and a step bit does wonders to be able to allow you to slowly creep up on that without oversizing it. These switches also have like a locating pin on them. They probably make a bracket these are made to slide into, and that locating pin helps to straighten this up. Well, these are tight enough fit, it doesn't really need this locating pin. So I'm literally just taking a box cutter and just kind of shaving that pin off because it does have catches on the side here. And as long as you get it in straight and snap it in the position, trust me, this is a tight enough fit, it's not going to move. So let me get this one kind of shaved down a little bit, modified, and I'll show you the result. One moment. And welcome back. So just to show you that there, you may not be able to see it too well on the camera. It's not completely shaven down, that pin, just enough that we can get it into the hole, but that will also help add to the friction fit. So one moment. And welcome back. So that's just an example of the passenger side. You can see down is level 1 and then up is level 2. And these do have an LED indicator on them, and it does change color based on the setting that it's on. But as you can see, it kind of hides itself in there quite nicely, and it kind of keeps it out of the way of, you know, getting hit by anything. And you can see we've got our, you know, driver's side wiring hook up there, our passenger side wiring hook up there. And all we have left now is to get the rear ones situated. But what I want to do is get this console installed and get it to where it's going to sit. And then we can measure up. And in case you're curious, there's the one on the driver's side there. You know, same orientation. Up is level 2, down level 1. So what I want to do is get this console where it's going to sit. And then we can take this back back panel off here. Let me show you that. You can see we got our back panel with our port. And then what we'll more than likely do is probably try and locate the rear switches somewhere in here, it feels like we got a little bit of ribbing here, a little bit of reinforcement ribbing that might get in the way on the other side of this panel. I don't want to put them, you know, on the side because this is going to be blocked by the seat. But what we could potentially do is, yeah, like I'm thinking possibly back here, because this is gonna, looks like they found a couple. This was the front piece of trim that we took off. Let's take a look at that rear piece of trim, because I think they fought that same problem with the reinforcement ribbing and the plastic when they put them onto this vent piece of this old center seat. Sorry, I've got stuff just everywhere right now. Yeah, you can see they've got some reinforcement hashing in there, but it looks like they were able to just kind of drill through it and get them to seat. So I'm thinking we're going to do the same thing, just kind of keep them low, because what's happening is there's not a lot of excess wire that comes up and meets these switches in the back, because the cab that's on that truck is a mega cab. So it's 6 inches deeper than the biggest. It's pretty much the biggest cab you can get on a Ram truck. And what's happening is, since it's third party, yeah, they give you a fairly decent length of wire to wire everything up, but those rear seats are pretty far back. So, and you may have noticed when we removed that console in the previous clip, and I'll show you when we go to install this one, you know, there's only maybe 3 or 4 inches of wire sticking up under that they routed underneath the carpet to match up to this. So what I want to do is get that console in place, kind of where it's going to sit, and then gauge from there what we need to do, because we may need to get some wire. And I'm going to try to keep from doing this if at all possible, simply because I just don't want to put a bunch of splices in this. But we may have to get some wire, cut this, and lengthen this, and kind of make this a longer pigtail in order to put the switches where we need. But to show you that again, I'm thinking, just to keep it within use of the individuals in the back seat, kind of, again, just let down here, down at the bottom, kind of very close to where it was when it was on this old center seat here. And the nice thing is we can just kind of leave that back panel non-attached, and that can be the last thing we do. It doesn't need to be attached to install the console itself. So with that, yeah, besides, we can't put the switches in here in the corner even if we wanted to, because that is some fairly thick, it's like 2 layers of plastic in here. Even if we take this side panel off, yeah, we would have to drill through quite a bit, and I'd rather not do that. If we can do it, if there's a long enough wire, just because it would be thinner to go through, we may put the switches up here on either side, and that way it'll come out to the left and right of our power port here, and go that way. But again, I don't think the wire is going to be long enough, but we'll have to see what we can do. And if we have to, we'll also pull the carpet up and see if we can pull some slack in that wiring, and maybe get it at least long enough to kind of get it up in here, you know, which would be easier to do than trying to drill through all this reinforcement. But you know, again, we'll have to look at it. But anyway, like you said, it'll be a few moments for you, but it'll be overnight for me. It's getting pretty late in the day here. And when we return, we'll get everything out, hopefully, to the truck, get things cleaned up as far as do a quick vacuum of the rug underneath, and then we'll see about starting to set the console in place. and then go from there. And with that, it'll be, like I said, it'll be a few moments for you, but overnight for me. So one moment. And welcome back, and to y'all, a good day. What you're looking at is the aftermath of the center console install, in which this is part 2 of that install, in which we will complete the center console install itself. I wanted to add this in at the beginning because I lost the section of video that kind of explains where the video is going to start. And that is, we took one of these adapters that is left over from the old trim. If you remember, this was the old trim for the truck, in which it had a USB power port on that side and a switched 12-volt port on that side. And what we ended up doing was taking the switched 12-volt port and soldering an extra wire to it and leading that down and kind of stashing this behind the dash plugged into the what is now kind of unused harness, and using that switched 12-volt feed to drive a set of gauges which are being used to run the supercharger. So I just kind of wanted to add this in to explain what you see, this little adapter with now the extra wire coming off of it was being used for. And with that being said, let's get this video started. Thank you much. Bye. And welcome back. So we're back inside the cab here. Just wanted to show you a little bit more what I'm referring to. Remember, this was the plug that went to this 12-volt power port, which would normally sit in a piece of trim here, which obviously is no longer going to be here. So you can see we've got it wrapped up just to insulate it a bit better. I went ahead and put a tie wrap around the base of it against that wire to help hold it in place. And you can see we got our connector plugged back in. So we're basically just taking this power lead, which we know is switched 12 volts. We're going to put a set of splice connectors on it, or spade connectors on it, this set here, and just plug it back into this fuse here, which then ultimately gives us our keyed 12 volts for our gauge cluster here. And once again, just wanted to reiterate that this is just a temporary power connection. This will all be removed once we go over to the bank's setup. But this was an effort being done this way once again so that we didn't have to splice in to the factory harness, because I prefer not to splice in the factory harnesses if I can get away with it. So we're just going to kind of use this as a little bit of an adapter, so to speak. So that being said, I'm going to put some spade connections on these terminals and complete this connection, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. Oh, and I'll put a link in the description to what I'm using. Sorry, I'm using these Knipex strippers, which are awesome for being able to do these stripped ends like this. And just a set of normal Klein crimpers with the color codes on it, based on the color of terminal that we're using. In this case, blue for the gauge wire. But let me go ahead and wrap this up, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So got you a little bit of shop light in there, and hopefully you can see this. We just zip tied that little adapter, that 12-volt adapter, or I should say 12-volt power port, onto this harness just to hold on to it and kind of just tuck the fuse. As you can see, off on the side here, just so that we have access to it in the event that we have to replace the fuse for our aftermarket gauge cluster. But like I said, all that's temporary until we get a Banks eye dash in here, and then we'll pull all that out. But I think that's secure enough. I think that'll get the job done that we needed, and now we can move on to the next piece, which is going to be getting our front bracket installed in. And this is the front bracket we need that holds on the little piece of ductwork, as well as what the sides of the console will bolt into. Now, as we commented in the previous video, there's a square set of inserts. Let me get you some light in here. There we go. There's a square set of nut inserts that would normally pop into here, and then you can just thread your hardware into it. Well, the user sent the bolts with the kit, but they didn't send the inserts. And a lot of times, it's no fault of the seller. A lot of times when you buy those kits, they don't come with these inserts. I did manage to find a set of bolts, however, or nuts, however, that'll fit these bolts, correct thread pitch. They're actually the 13mm nuts off the back of what secured the old center jump seat. Had the same thread pitch as the bolts that secure this front brace. Now, getting a nut behind here, a manual nut behind here, and tighten it isn't going to be an issue. There's plenty of space. The tight one is going to be this one here over here on the left. There's not much space to get behind there, because you've got one of these HVAC modules right here kind of in your way. It looks like we can maybe go underneath. We just need to hold that bolt well enough in order to get it reasonably tight. It doesn't have to be 18,000 foot-pounds or anything of that nature. But that's what I'm going to attempt to do, because I don't have the inserts. I'm just going to use some standard nuts on the back of these bolts. We'll see if we can get them tight, and then we'll move on to the next piece. Now, there are some locator pins you'll see on this front bracket. So this front bracket only goes in this way, and in this case, it happens to go in that way right there. You can see it has provisions for the existing trim bolts that are in here, and it just rests on these two plastic pegs that come off the trim, and then of course you can put your bolts in. And you can see we just got to push down on the carpet a little bit, and we can get our little small piece of ductwork there to plug into here, which then will ultimately go on the console. So I'm going to fidget with this a little bit and see and make sure I can get a kind of bolt again behind there, so we can get this bracket tightened on, and then we'll move on to the next piece. So one moment. And welcome back. So just want to show you what I'm doing here. Is I was able to get it pushed up from the bottom, and you can kind of see it just teetering in the hole in there. And what I'm going to attempt to do now, getting it tight is going to be another thing. We may just have to go for best effort on that side. Obviously, if you've got the inserts, by all means, use the inserts. It's going to make this a lot easier to do. You see these particular nuts we locked out, and it kind of has this built-in washer. So it's just kind of teetering like this between the bottom of this bracket and this piece of HVAC box here. So since there's enough kind of slop and wiggle room in here, we're just going to hold the bracket up there, put the bolt in, kind of jiggle the bolt, go fishing, so to speak, and see if we can get that bolt to start to thread. And then we should be able to kind of just reach up in here and grab it with the tip of our finger once it's started to thread, and should be able to hold it well enough to kind of get that side, reasonably tight. The bolt, hopefully, or the nut I should say, will hopefully kind of hold itself at one point and allow us to put a reasonable amount of torque on there to hold it. These front braces, yeah, they're the mounting point for the sides of the console, but they don't seem to hold a lot of weight. A lot of the weight is just the console itself just kind of sitting on the floor. These more just act as kind of a, from what I can tell, just an attachment or a secure point, just to keep the front of the console from coming, up off the floor, or wanting to shift backwards, things of that nature. So that's going to be the game plan. Just like I said, going to go for a little bit of fishing, see if we can snag that nut on the other side using the bolt, and I'll bring it back and let you know how it goes. One moment. And welcome back. So we got that one started. Kind of the best way to reach it is from up underneath, and I was able to just kind of hold the nut in place with my finger well enough to at least get a couple threads started. So again, just kind of jiggling and fishing, but the pain with it is that not only is this in your way, but this metal is actually folded over in places, so you can't get straight on it or try to go straight down to get to it. And this edge and spots of this metal behind here is actually fairly sharp, so just kind of keep that in mind, that may hurt a little bit, especially if you slip. So I'm looking the ways to see if there's any way that bottom metal piece would come out, and it doesn't look like it. It looks like, I mean, you can obviously, I've had these dashes out before, and you can obviously, you know, take all the bolts out and remove the dash, but this metal brace that these plug into, there may be a way to pop this brace out of here. It doesn't look like it. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, but I'm kind of curious if you had to, if it could be removed. No, it looks like, yeah, no, it's spot welded. In this case, this bottom piece that we're threading into is spot welded to the rest of the frame. So you'd have to take this entire rear dash out, the actual metal support frame of the dash, to do that. Like I said, I'll look it up and I'll see if I can find the part numbers for those inserts. So in case anybody else is doing this, you know, you'll be able to have a bit easier go at this. But what I'm going to do now is work on getting that second bolt nut started, which again, as you can see on this side, is a lot easier to get to because you can actually reach in behind it and hold it. It's just that one that's the pain. Anyway, with that being said, I'll pause you and bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see that we got our front brace in. We got our bolts tight. Our nuts and bolts, I should say. Our fastening hardware tight, let's put it that way. Now we did find out that we were able, at least in our case, to kind of come in here behind this, use the channel as a guide, and be able to kind of just fidget with this a little bit. And we were able to get a wrench in, as you can see here, and just kind of slide it this way, and just kind of, while that bolt back there was loose, just finagle it a little bit until we could get the opened end of a wrench back there to hold it, and that allowed us to kind of hold everything and get it nice and secure. So you can see that's on there. That's good. Now we just have our piece of ducting to put on next, which should go, just judging by the Christmas tree clips, it looks like it's probably going to go something like this. Yeah, based on the foam you see here on the HVAC end of this and into this piece. So let me get this piece secure. I need both hands. I kind of need to push down the slack in this carpet to get this piece of ductwork in there, and of course those Christmas tree clips will just clip into the lower parts of our bracket here. So in case you're wondering what you're fighting on this side, this is the adapter that feeds this, that then gets air out of the back of the console. So if you're dealing with a setup that doesn't have air that goes out the back of either the jump seat or the console, then chances are you're not going to have this piece to contend with, to fight with. It'll probably just be blocked off, so you'll have an easier chance if you have to manually put, you know, a nut and a bolt through there. So let me get this in a position and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see that piece of ducting is in. It just slides right in place, mates up with the piece coming out of the HVAC box, and then secures via Christmas tree clips to that lower bracket, as you can see there. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go get the rear bracket, and yes, the first hole, because we had the center jump seat, was there. That was the bolt on this side that secured the center jump seat. That was the one on front, if you remember. The second one we needed for the rear was here. It was just covered up with a piece of this rubberized tape, and you can see it's there, it's threaded, and it's good for us to put a bolt into. So let me go get that rear bracket, and I'll be right back. One moment. And welcome back. As you can see, we've got our rear bracket in. And just like on the 1500 we were working on, there is the word front written on it with the arrows going this way. So just to let you allows you to get it in the correct orientation. And when you do, the divots that you can see in here will line up with the frame and the bolt holes. So everything's in secure. You can see we cut a little piece of tubing and just kind of put it around this edge because of where they ran the wiring for the heated seats. We'll take a look at it when we get the console in here. We may be able to run the wiring this way, or we may be able to just kind of snake it around this way. It just depends on which way it's going to be better for reach, because there's not much slack in these cables. And unfortunately, I can't free any more up just because of the way they ran these cables, not without literally taking out all the seats and pulling the entire carpet up in order to gain access to it. But I think we're going to have enough here to do what we need to do, and I actually need to cut another piece of tubing here for the other side and do the same thing. I don't want these to, you know, obviously, as you can see, hit up against here and rub through. Probably overthinking things a little bit, but I'd rather take a couple extra minutes now and, you know, not have to tear everything back apart later and fix it short. Along those lines, or not along those lines, but if you remember, we did have a bolt up here at one time, and we had two other smaller bolts in front that were holding down a piece of trim slash pencil tray that hung off of the old center seat. I had a spare piece of hardware, or a spare bolt, because he sent some bolts with the console, so that gave us a spare. I also put anti-seize on these rear ones as well, because they do go through and they do get exposed underneath, and I don't want those rusting in the event we have to take them out. So in order to not have a just a hole there, we just went ahead and threaded in and put in some spare bolts again, just covered it with anti-seize. You can see we put that one back in, that one in, as well as that one, because they're not going to be used. They're not going to be used as a fastener for the center console. And rather than just have an exposed hole there that moisture may potentially wick up through, go ahead and just plug them, I guess is the way of putting it. So, rear bracket, front bracket, we got our wiring situated yesterday, so that's kind of run and ready to go. I think what we're going to do next is, let me get another piece of tubing, again, like I said, cut for that edge there, just to give us a little extra protection. I am going to go get the console, but I'm going to kind of take it apart a little bit and strip it down to just its bare frame, its structure, and then we'll put the structure here first, and then we can always kind of come behind ourselves and put all the side panels and the top cushion seat and everything back on. But let me see how much of that I can get tore down. Also, I'm going to have to pull the rear mat out of here because this mat was ordered without the console in mind. It was ordered as a center jump seat, so it depends on how far back it goes. You can see by the indentation of the carpet, this is how far back the jump seat went, and I think the console is going to end up in the same position, but what we're going to do is just roll this up and kind of pull it out of here and get it out of our way to help with our install. So let me go get the center console, clear up some working space here, and then I'll bring you back. So one moment. And welcome back. Well, you can see we're just in the process of getting our center console in here, and found it easier to just kind of load it in from the back, swing it around and just kind of place it down between the seats. As far as maneuverability, it's not too bad. We didn't have to disassemble all of it. As you can see, we left a side trim on and the back cushion on, or back lid on, I should say. It is easier to have the cup holder out of here so we can make sure that our vent lines up with our vent tube there. Then we can get all, you know, our electrical for our heated seats and everything reattached, and then we can kind of put the cup holder in last. But I do want to make sure that these stay straight. Like that one is for passenger, this one is for driver. And then we'll have to work on getting our wiring harness off our center console, fish down where it needs to go under the driver's seat here. So what you're gonna I guess I should say what we're going to work on next is just kind of sliding this center console forward, getting it to match up in here. You can see you've got guide pins on the side here that'll go on the holes on the existing dash. So just going to be a lot of kind of pushing and scooting, and then I'll bring you back once we got it into position. But so far so good. We're getting in here one bit at a time. So one moment. And welcome back. Well, you can see we got our console slid into place. We're on our alignment pins. We got our wiring umbilical pulled down, back up underneath the seat, ready for its connections. And we're just in the process now of taking care of a couple little clips. There's two screws, two of these same dash screws right here, one on each side. This one's on the passenger side, that secure the top of this molding to the dash. Now, it doesn't look to be uber critical because you got your main mounting bolt right below it that goes into that front bracket. Oh, and I don't know if I mentioned it, you can see that we got our ductwork lined up and plugged in as well. So what I'm doing, small pocket screwdriver to the rescue. The old dash, or the old trim, has a little insert that I had two screws that thread into, one on the driver, one on the passenger. And what I'm doing is just coming in here with a small pocket screwdriver. This one happens to be Power Stroke Tech Top. Got this from a link on Rainman Ray's channel. And what we can do is just kind of come in here and pop these clips out. Once you get them started, like that one right there, you can see they'll relatively just roll out. And then we could just take the clips out of here and then stick them up in the gaping holes that are here and just give that top piece something to thread into. So I am going to continue to dig this clip out of here and relocate it, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So I just want to show you what one of those clips looks like when you get it out. And yeah, this is something I should have done before we put the console in, because it would have been a bit easier. But no harm, no foul. We don't have it attached to anything right now. We can just kind of shimmy this back just like that and get our clips relocated. So we should just be able to kind of take this clip just like this, push it in until it locks, and do the same thing on the other side, and now we got something we can thread into. So I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. Well, you can see we've got our console in. We went ahead and took care of the clips in front. We haven't secured anything yet because we're still in the process of taking care of a little bit of wiring here, and we're looking at where the rear wiring came out for our heated seats. Now, if you remember, we knew these were going to be a bit short, and we were hoping that maybe we could kind of put them in the center of the back panel, and there's just a hair short of being able to do that. Unfortunately, now if we come down here at the bottom and put them down low where they were located on the other console, it looks like it'll go through fine. So unfortunately, rather than kind of putting them up here, we're just going to put them back down here in the corner, and that should take care of them. It's just, again, there's not enough wire, and we can't pull any slack up. And again, not without kind of unbolting all the seats and pulling all the carpet up and all the other fun that comes along with that. So what I'm going to do is just get out the same step bit from yesterday. Now, there's got a nice little marking, thankfully, on each side of this back piece of trim that we can use as the reference. So what I'm going to do, just so that we don't inadvertently come into here and mess around where this is going to clip, because I don't want obviously the switch to be sticking out and hit something here and keep the back panel from snapping in. I think we're going to come a little more than halfway in from this dot, probably about this far. And then what we'll do is, and that should put it inside of, on each side of this back panel, that should end the switch up inside this piece of dead space within here on either side, and then in that way we can get our things secured. So we'll just use this as the reference. Like I said, we're going to come into about here on each one of them, drill our holes and get our switches installed, and then we can kind of put our back panel in. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and take care of, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see that we've got our wiring attached. Yeah, having it down low gives you enough slack to get everything plugged back in, or at least, again, we're just dealing with the fact that it was already installed and they're aftermarket. So now the nice thing is, should we elect to move up to a factory set of heated seats, we can always get a new replacement back piece of trim and just kind of make it look like none of this ever happened, or we can just do what we may do to the fronts and just leave the switches there just unactive. But as you can see, everything's wired up. We should now just be able to take our back piece, because it just holds itself in via some clips. I may have to push down. Okay, let me manipulate the console here, because I kind of need both my hands to get everything in line up. I got to pick up on the console a little bit because it's not all bolted down to the floor yet. And again, it just snaps. I'm going to get this clipped back in the position and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got that clipped back in place, and to be fair and to be completely honest with you, you can see I'm a little bit closer with the switch on that line to that line versus what we are on this one, but they're in, they'll work. Down low, up high. There we go, beautiful. So we've got that part of it done. We went ahead and plugged in the wiring for the front heated switches, or heated seat switches, and it's going to continue on. Let me bring you around the front of this and we'll continue getting some pieces in here. So one moment. And welcome back. So we got our front hardware in, which was the little bolt over here that we moved the threaded insert for, and the main bolt here on the side. Now we still have the rear main bolts to put in, but we'll get to that here in a bit once we can move the seats forward, because it'll make it easier to get to that rear fastener. But we're just going to put our bezel piece in first, our dash bezel / radio bezel piece in first before we put the cup holder tray back in. And if you remember in the previous clip, we just moved all the options over from the previous bezel, so it's literally just hooking all the options back up again. No harm, no foul. You've seen me do that before on several other videos. So what I'm going to work on is just getting all the wiring harness back in, and then get this trim piece just pushed back into place. Now what happens here is that you're going to see, you're going to have some extra of these inserts, threaded inserts left over. At least in our case we will, because remember that part of doing the console upgrade was removing the big pull-out center tray along with the USB power ports that were on either side, because remember we still have another plug up here inside the dash area for a power port that we may use. And like I said, I may just, there it is right there, just to show it to you, I may just see if I can wiggle this through and get it to kind of come out where the glove box light used to be, and just kind of plug in that little, you know, USB adapter and have a charging port inside the box here. I don't know, I'll think about it. Either way, I'm rambling. Let me get all the electrical hooked back up to this, and want to get this back into place. So one moment. And welcome back. So I just want to show you this. There's some, you know, slight tolerance differences because of the console and this trim. It'll fit. Everything will work. Don't worry about that. But you kind of have to play a little bit of the game, especially if you've got a column shifter like we do here. Because if you try to put your wiring on like this while it's out, that'll never clear the shifter, even if you put the shifter in gear and kind of knock it out of the way. What I have found out you kind of have to do, at least on this one, get everything happy with everything, all the vents and everything installed, is to kind of start at that corner, get it underneath the gear shifter, and there you go. It'll fall into place, and then you can kind of manipulate it this way, sideways, to get in here and get all your wiring reattached. So just be mindful of that. Like I said, I tried to drop it all the way into like reverse and neutral, and it just didn't seem to give enough clearance to clear that. And like I said, maybe I'm just missing something, but I think there's just again a slight difference, because this trim is a little bit longer than the trim that comes here if you have the center console, because this whole clip, and I can show you, actually I got it right here for me, right here in front of me, you can see here on the side, you've got 3 clips on this side versus this one, the newer trim, you've got 4. Because it's got to go down a little bit lower to meet into where it clips into there and matches up with the trim and everything. So I'm going to work on getting our wiring all plugged back in, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see that we went ahead and got our center bezel back in with all our controls. Electrical is reattached. We've got our Torx fastener put back in above our plug. Our 2 Torx fasteners on top, along with our little rubber piece of trim to cover those up. We went ahead and put our cup holder in as well. Just the one electrical connection to remake there, to be mindful of that. And it just kind of have to just push it forward a little bit, and it just snaps down in place. That's why the center bezel has to be there first, because it's got 2 fasteners that come down here and screw into 2 speed clips that's on the bottom of that bezel. So let me get some fasteners into that, and I'll bring you back, and we went ahead and clipped on the driver's side piece of molding, but I'll show you that here on the passenger side. So one moment. And welcome back. As promised, here's our passenger side piece of trim. And again, this is a piece of trim that you should get, or want to make sure that you do get, if you're going to do one of these center console conversions, because it just snaps onto the front of the console. Let's just say, let's get those tags behind there where they belong. And it just clips in place, and you can see it just follows the contour of the existing dash and all the trim. Does a nice job of covering all that up. So the next thing I'm going to work on is that now that we've got the console mostly in here, with the exception of the 2 back bolts, I'm going to work on getting the passenger seat bolted back in and get its electrical hooked back up, and then we can focus on doing the electrical of the driver's seat. And by electrical, I mean the electrical for just the console we need to get all reattached. So with that being said, let me go ahead and get this passenger seat re-secured, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. We got our passenger seat taken care of. It's now bolted back in. The electrical is reattached. We also have our electrical connections underneath our driver's side seat reattached for our console. You can see the USB there off to the right, and then the other 2 following, which are clipped in the bracket. The clip for the USB one came off, but no harm, no foul. It's not going anywhere. And then up top side here, we're just putting our inserts back in. Little rubber inserts they give you for all these, just to kind of cover up the screw holes and such. First one's just going to go in, give it a little bit of a push, a little bit of a wiggle. That one locks in, covers up our screws, makes it look a bit nicer. And the center one for the tray here kind of looks like a Z. And it just sits down in there like that, again covering up our screws, makes everything look good. So at this point, we should have power into our console, and we should have a constant power and a switch power. The switch power is going to be that adapter right there. What I am curious on is if we open up our console here. Now this is going to be USB. I believe on this one, it's either this one or this one that attaches to the radio. One of these should have power. The other one is for radio comm. And let's just plug in the old phone here and see if we start to charge. Yep, we got a lightning bolt symbol, and you can see that we are charging there. There it goes, charging 67%. So yes, that one is constant power without the key in the ignition. That is awesome. So that tells us our wiring is good to that point. I don't have like what you would consider a cigarette lighter adapter or a USB adapter to test that with. I'm not as concerned with that one. If that one is working, that also tells me that one should be working. Now also, and I'll have to turn the radio down so that we don't get a copyright strike. But another item that we can test here, or 2 more items we can test here once I find the keys and put something in ignition, is whether or not the radio sees the USB as data. turn that off so we don't get a copyright. Wait for... I'm sorry, it's gonna ding. Let me close the door just so that dinging doesn't drive everybody nuts. There we go, that's better. So we're gonna accept that, and if we go and plug in, I've just got a little USB drive here with some media files on it. It's either gonna be that one or the other one. Yeah, radio doesn't see it yet. Radio main, there it goes. Reading USB. Perfect. Whoa, oh. Don't want a copyright strike, but you can hear that we are playing music from that USB drive, which is perfect. So, once again, I wish it would stop unmuting itself. So, there we go. We've got it. We can read data on this one. We've got power on this one. That is awesome. That checks those boxes. And now, do we have heated seats? And yes, we do. We have, that is up, so that is high. You can see by the, hopefully you can see by the red LED there. And low, that LED turns green. Beautiful. Okay, let me check the passenger side here real quick. Yep, we got high, we got low. We're good there. And on the backs, we got high, we got low. Actually, let me get you in a better position to see that. High, low, and the driver's side rear, high and low. Perfect, okay. And of course, we've got another 12-volt source back here that's also keyed. Now, along with being keys, if you remember, we tapped into the what was the keyed 12-volt port when we had the old trim. And just to verify that's working, you can see we got all of our gauge clusters powered. And if we turn the ignition off, boom, all of our gauges go to sleep. All right, so perfect. Well, with that being said, that is it. We are installed, we are done. And just to kind of give you an overview shot of that, in my opinion, this, it's a nice upgrade. Not only is it a cosmetic upgrade, in my opinion, but it gives you, like I said, much easier access to items you may have here, here, or in here, because this part kind of sits about as tall as the center jump seat, but the center jump seat would normally end, you know, maybe right about in here somewhere. And now you have all of this, which is brought up to a higher level. Again, it just, in my opinion, it makes things a little bit more convenient, and it looks a little bit sharper as far as the interior. So, once again, to recap, we bought this as a kit off eBay. There will be a link in the description to the gentleman's store that I bought it from. And if you're going to buy one of these, and if what you have is the center seat and you want to change it out to the center console, what you're going to need to make sure that you get, most importantly, obviously, is the console itself with all the trim pieces, especially the lower ones we were looking at that we put on earlier. Make sure it comes with your rubber inserts and as much as the bolt hardware as possible. The wiring harness, you're definitely going to want to get this newer bezel, because the older bezel, as you saw, won't fit. This bezel, as you can see, mates up with the center console. So, console itself, all the trim pieces, wiring harnesses, rubber inserts, bezel piece, and hardware. If you can get all the bolts with it, that is especially helpful. As far as the electrical, you saw that all the items in this truck, as far as the connections underneath, were electrically compatible with the console we took out of here. What we gained is an extra power port, which comes out here, that obviously we didn't have because all we had was the seats. All we had was this upper area here. So we've got an extra power port now. Awesome. Like I said, we got a lot more storage to deal with. Once again, I'm sure you've seen these before, but you've got that storage area a little bit up there, and you've got the larger storage area down there. And with that being said, I'm going to let you go. This is going to be a wrap on part 2. I know it was a little bit long. And don't let it seem to be tedious, and don't let it shy you away either. You got to understand a lot of what took a lot of time for us to do this console swap was that we were dealing with those third-party heated seats, so we had to accommodate, again, the switches and the wiring. Overall, it's not a terrible job. It will take some time, so just allocate accordingly. And it did help and was actually kind of needed, unfortunately, to unbolt the passenger seat so it can kind of be lifted and shifted, which helped get the old center seat out and get the new console in. But with that being said, I will let you go, and if you have not subscribed, please consider doing so. We're trying to get to that 3,000 subscriber goal by the end of the year. Every little bit helps in that regard, and I'm thankful for each and every one of you who have subscribed. And again, if you're not, please consider doing so. With that being said, I will bring you back for the next one. This was only one of several upgrades that we've got planned on this 2500, and I'll bring you back in a bit. Thank you much. Bye. Sorry, wanted to show you this. I completely forgot until I was putting the rear mats back in. This is the seat belt receiver for the center jump seat, and it is bolted to the driver's side rail. I didn't feel like unbolting the driver's seat to pick it up enough to get this out, so I'm just going to let this extra seat belt just kind of lay back here. But I wanted to add that in there, and I forgot to say something about that. And with that, I'll let you go. Thank you much. Bye.